Good evening, my name is Luke Thwaites. Tonight on the 7:30 report, the residential housing trends shaping Melbourne's skyline. Urban sprawl and affordable housing versus inner city development. The two contrasting residential property styles impacting the way Melburnians are choosing to live their lives. Live tonight to debate this topic is James Sorrell, property developer for JR Property Group. Patrick Ryan, leading economist for the Department of Housing Victoria. Deputy Mayor of the City of Whittlesea, Jason Proctor, and the Minister of Planning, Wayne Dunn. Now I will throw it first to James. What is your take on this?
Thanks, Luke. Urban sprawl is in no way a new problem that has recently arisen in Melbourne. It has been here for plenty of years, with high levels of growth being recorded in several residential sectors, including Casey, Cardinia, Hume, Melton, Mitchell, Whittlesea and Whittle. This isn't such a bad thing, as the Herald Sun reported on the 15th of April last year that the Australian Bureau of Statistics found that 60% of people who move from interstate come to live in Melbourne. This is great, it's putting Melbourne on the map of world cities. Urban sprawl is positive in that it allows construction of improved facilities on the urban fringe, which leads to people being able to live a healthy and satisfying lifestyle no matter what distance they are from the city's centre. One of my most recent projects was a childcare centre and a high school in the growth corridor of Casey. Such a project will clearly impact hundreds of Melburnians' families' lives and harness their children's education, providing them with a strong platform as they grow into adulthood. This is a win-win for the Melbourne economy and for its residents. House prices are much more affordable on the suburban outreaches of Melbourne than that of their cramped siblings in the inner sector such as Richmond. In contrast, the median house price of $1.235 million in Richmond offers. Berwick in the city of Casey offers a much more reasonable median house price of $590,000 and a unit for that matter for $420,000, according to realestate.com. In addition to this, by supporting urban sprawl, we can begin to lead a more healthier, more vibrant city and lifestyle. If we look to relocate these major factories and warehouses towards these new parts of Melbourne, as a state, we will improve the air quality that we generate. Driving for a safer environment for all residents, this will also decrease the number of airborne diseases such as fevers. A recent study in China found that moving factories outside the CBD zone by 20 k's improved air quality by 50%. Luke, urban sprawl isn't as bad as the media portrays it to be, because 1, it provides for cheap housing, 2, it provides for great infrastructure, and 3, it's putting Melbourne on the map of great cities in this world. Thank you.
You make some strong arguments there, James. Now, Patrick, what is your take on James's stance and the idea that urban sprawl is a good thing for the economy?
This urban sprawl has got to stop. It's a joke. Luke, our economy is being damaged by an out-of-control rate of housing construction, which can't be supported in the long run. If Melbourne continues to operate based on current market figures, we will have an abundance of new suburbs, unsupported, with a significant lack of demand to grow. In saying this, we shouldn't just be narrowing in on housing affordability. Ross Gittins of The Age recently wrote on the 8th of March 2017 about the damage urban sprawl was having on the economy and the negative impact it was having on Victorian residents. The government wants to eliminate stamp duty, but will this work? All first home buyers will benefit from the same assistance. With the demand continuing to exceed supply, house prices are climbing at rates not yet witnessed in Melbourne. On the urban fringe, we will see the same changes, so why not build closer to the city? A reduction in travel time to and from work and school with improved accessibility to major attractions are certainly incentives of living nearer to the city. In addition to this, the government will be saving by not having to build new infrastructure like roads, railways and community centres. Urban sprawl has increased racial and economic disparity amongst Melburnians. In moving to the urban outreaches, we are encouraging people to give up their tax dollars, leaving behind the poorer, unsupported areas of Victoria. Our economy will not survive this. Funding for policies and programs will be affected, directly impacting the positive changes we can make in education, crime prevention and rehabilitation. To re-establish a functioning community, urban sprawl must stop. To re-establish the image and scope of Melbourne, urban sprawl must stop. Did you know Melbourne is the longest city in the world? It takes 2 hours by car, or 84 kilometres in peak hour traffic, to drive from Frankston to Hillside. Building new suburbs further and further away from the core of Melbourne isn't going to fix the housing affordability crisis. When we do see the next downturn in the economy, the result will be an abundance of ghost towns, stagnant with no drive for production. A growing dependence on cars for those who choose to live on the urban fringe will place unsupportable stresses on major tollways, highways and roads. The congestion that builds up as a byproduct will force the government to react by spending taxpayers' dollars, upgrading existing roads to cope with the rising demands. It is just a detrimental cycle that will continue if urban sprawl doesn't halt. Luke, it goes without saying that a functioning economy and the concept of urban sprawl do not belong in the same sentence.
Interesting insights into the economy's projected health, Patrick. Coming to you live now are the first set of polls for the night, straight from you, the viewer, as it looks like 65% are agreeing with James's viewpoints from earlier. We will now cross to our third guest, Wayne. Good evening to you. As a planner, is there a way Melbourne can control urban sprawl and the consequences that have been associated with it? Or are you in support of this urban growth pattern?
From a planning perspective, what we are witnessing is a controlled attempt by the Andrews government to effectively deal with the rising population in Melbourne. The idea that urban sprawl, if there even is such a thing, is ruining the economy is a farce. These so-called consequences, or byproducts previously mentioned, haven't only come about because of the changes being made to the outer suburban parts of Melbourne. Melbourne is not just a growing city spreading out to accommodate its people. As a planner and as a resident of Melbourne myself, I'm aware that the growth being seen may be of some concern. However, we must acknowledge the work that Andrews government and Planning Minister Hyemi Hwang are doing, ensuring the relevant changes being made are all in line with the one goal of building a sustainable Melbourne and Victoria moving forward. In an article written by Aisha Dow for The Age newspaper on March 10th, 2017, we learned about the ways the current Andrews government were looking to implement new policies with a strategic approach to facilitating appropriate developments, introducing mandatory height limits in neighbourhood and residential zones, which currently account for over half of Melbourne's zoned land, going away from the discretionary controls that once allowed developers to present their ideas to VCAT, searching for a greater profit, is a step in the right direction. By sustaining the current urban growth boundary at its present location and the 13.5 metre height limit for future residential developments in growth areas of Melbourne, planners are increasingly being encouraged to focus their efforts here. These measures alone are enough to not only control the urban growth patterns we are seeing in Melbourne today, but to also eliminate any potential for uncontrolled, reckless development occurring that could negatively impact our economy. In response to Patrick's previous comments about the introduction of new suburbs, as a planner, I believe there is room for growth to occur, which positively influences the scope of Melbourne. By focusing entirely on the negatives that are no certainty to arise, like the stagnant ghost towns that fail to offer opportunities for production, how are we improving Melbourne? My goal is to plan Melbourne so that these new sectors offer affordable housing with the adequate levels of infrastructure required to support the new traffic they will receive. I challenge Patrick, as an economist, to study the potential benefits growth in Melbourne offers, such as new jobs, improved living conditions, highlighted earlier by James. Melbourne has unlimited potential, which we should all be trying to harness moving forward.
And to our final speaker tonight, representing the views of the community, Jason. As Deputy Mayor, do you look upon this favourably, or are you opposed to the influx of housing developments taking place in your neighbourhood?
From the community's perspective, I believe that we have a great divide in what is viewed as the right approach to cope with urban sprawl. The polls tonight reflect this. Firstly, urban sprawl can be so detrimental to not only the economy but to the environment, nature and the farming industry as well. Let's have a look at the wildlife. All these new suburbs are being built in areas where native habitats once thrived. Land is being converted from agricultural farming to residential just to support our growing population. But what about the farming industry? And what about the native animals, the kangaroos, koalas and wombats? These changes we see in Melbourne reflect the selfish attitudes of single-minded Victorians. They have no understanding whatsoever of how their decisions are to the detriment of native flora and fauna. The urban sprawl we are experiencing could also lead to the overconsumption of water with excess runoff into dams and rivers, potentially being harmful to both humans and animals. Construction will increase exposure of gasolines, oils and other unwanted substances reaching catchment areas, polluting our water sources. But on the other hand, urban sprawl has greatly influenced Melbourne and the sector for which I serve, with the growth experience in Wildersley being a major boost to our local economy, bringing hundreds of jobs and boosting production. The increased population to the area has been matched with outstanding new infrastructure, including schools, recreational facilities and shopping centres. Unemployment in Australia is currently at 5.9%, with a corresponding figure to Melbourne at 5.5%. Looking to increase the housing opportunities in growth corridors of Melbourne will begin to limit this figure, and a result which would greatly enhance the economy in the long run. This prospect of cheaper housing becoming available as a byproduct further influences the likely support to make it available. With the 21st century bringing it forever escalating costs of living associated with high stamp duty, high deposits and low mortgage repayments, the urban fringe provides and presents a more attractive living arrangement for people of all walks of life, including me and you, Luke. So think about it.
You're certainly onto something there, Jason. You can continue having your say by jumping online and participating in the live polls. Thanks to all our guests on tonight's show for their perspective on urban sprawl and the impact it is having on our city's economy. My name is Luke Thwaites, and I look forward to you joining me next week for another edition of the 7:30 Report. For now, good night.